Hey everyone, it's Eric from the Going Forward podcast, and I want to talk to you today about a special episode that we are re-releasing courtesy of our friends at the Personal Injury Mastermind podcast. That's right, with our good friends from Ranking IO, Chris Dreyer. We dive into so many things in this episode. We talk about, what agencies are responsible for, what they're not responsible for. We dive into intake. We talk about marketing. How do you approach a new market? And how do you do it all with advertising? So we want you to tune into this episode, and we hope that you get some value out of it. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Going Forward is brought to you by Optimizer, an award-winning PPC management tool used by advertisers worldwide. Save time and boost the performance of your PPC campaigns on Facebook, Amazon, and Google or Microsoft. Get a 14-day free trial at optimizer.com/go/VIP.
Welcome to Going Forward, where inspiring conversations with leaders and entrepreneurs shape tomorrow. Dive into the depths of their journeys, the hurdles they've overcome, and the insights they bring to the future. Let's get moving right here, right now on Going Forward.
Everyone wants to play basketball and shoot a three-pointer like Steph Curry, but he's been playing fundamentals, since watching his dad on the court. And I think people forget that part. Everyone wants leads, but you can't forget the fundamentals that go along with it.
You want to dominate your market and sign high-value cases, but you can't just throw a massive budget at TV and billboards and expect the phone to ring if your core strategy is broken.
I always start out with budget, media, and message. So are you going to spend that amount of money for that Super Bowl ad and just have a spot that just doesn't do anything?
Most PI firms are stuck in the past, praying their traditional sales funnel still works. Today, we're tearing down that outdated model and building the marketing engine that actually beats inflated spend. This is Personal Injury Mastermind. I'm Chris Dreyer, founder and CEO of Rankings.io, the elite performance marketing agency for personal injury law firms. Excellence is the standard, which means dialing in your entire growth strategy. Today, I'm talking marketing with Eric M. Elliott, the founder of VIP Marketing and Craft Creative. Eric does more than run ads. He builds battle plans for law firms looking to take over their markets. He knows exactly how to match the right budget with the right media and the perfect message. We're breaking down why meta ads are your ultimate testing ground, how to turn your linear sales funnel into a self-sustaining referral flywheel, and why making real community deposits is the secret to taking market share from the giants. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from 2025? How are you thinking about the attraction, filling up the pipeline for a firm today?
Man, what a great question. And everyone talks about, getting more leads, but then they don't talk about what they're doing with the ones that they do get. And I had this conversation with David Haskinson. I know he was actually on your podcast before, and he developed this software too. And it's sometimes they're getting what they need, but they're not closing the door. And I think one of the things that agencies have to remember is we don't close cases. That's not what we do. We don't sign them up. Our job is to hopefully bring that right audience to you, and then you do your part, So it's a two-part thing. And I think some of the times we take that on, or we have that mindset to help them get cases. But the truth is, Chris, you can send, 600, leads to a firm, but if their intake isn't done the right way or set up the right way, then, they're coming after you saying, we're only at so many cases. And then you figure out they're answering the phone too late, or they're not forwarding the calls, or they're not empathetic on the phone call, or, they're questioning people too much without any, giving any empathy. So many different things. So I think the biggest part is I like to focus on the fundamental part of it. Everyone wants to play basketball and shoot a three-pointer like Steph Curry, but he's been playing fundamentals, since watching his dad on the court, And I think people forget that part. Everyone wants leads, but you can't forget the fundamentals that go along with it. I think that's crucial, man.
Let's talk about the fundamentals, though. What do you think the fundamentals are of marketing first, and then we'll do the fundamentals maybe of intake?
Man, good. I always start out with budget, media, and message. Having budget, media, and message. One, you got to be able to compete. There's some markets this across the country where guys will come to you, firms will come to you and say, we want to be able to crush it, but they don't have the money to be able to compete. So you got to have the budget. And then it's going to be the media part of it, and also the message. It's what are you going to say? So are you going to spend that amount of money for that Super Bowl ad and just have a spot that just doesn't do anything, so those three components are like some of the fundamentals that, we would utilize. And then, every firm's going to be different. Like, there are some firms that, they want to hunt rabbits, and then there's some firms that want to hunt elephants, and their fundamentals to them are going to be totally different. They're not looking for speed and lead. We have one firm that they will tell you, they're like, I don't want all those cases. They said, I only want 10 of them. I only want 10 a year but I don't want to take any of them that are going to be less than $1 million. Right. So there are firms like that. So, and I think it really depends on the firms, but still, I think a good, clean fundamental for us is always budget, media, and message, and being able to bifurcate each of those to really say like, okay, budget, check, media, check, message, check, and then being comfortable to be able to go to market with your message.
I think that's fantastic. I love where you led with budget, because they could pick the right channel, but they're undercapitalized, right? You want to go into broadcast television
100%.
with a shoestring budget. I mean, good luck, right? Same for search, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And the message, right, being different and standing out, so important, can lower those CPMs, like have that viral, maybe you get some extra visibility there.
Yeah.
On the channel before, I'm kind of beating this, like, let's say we, in a vacuum, some random city popped up. It's got 100,000 people. Maybe the PI attorneys haven't flooded it, but like, just in a vacuum, is broadcast first for that top of funnel? Is search first for the bottom of the funnel? Like how do you think of just a general mix?
Yeah, you know what? It's almost like it's a battle plan, is what it is. If you're going to go into a market, even if it's 100,000 population, and you start throwing all this money at TV and billboards and everything else, well, you can't manage what you can't measure. You just can't. I think one of the best ways, and there may be others who may think differently. There may be others who say, I'm just going to tear up the whole market and put billboards everywhere. But truthfully, I believe one of the best ways to do it is going into a market digitally, and also having some content to see like what you can pull out of that market and really start to gauge it and really start to and kind of throttle yourself, throttle in your budget, and also, but I think the best thing is having a great battle plan going into a market. If it's one that's underserved, having that good strategy so that you can have some frequency and also show some expertise so that people are coming to you. And then when you start pulling some cases and start dial it, show some dominance in that market and don't let it go.
I think it's a great answer. And one of the things on the digital, you said you open the door.
Yeah.
It's like you take Meta ads, Facebook ads. I like it because you can have so many messages. Like, and I know there's you want to have continuity and consistency, but like you could do a funnel for nursing, you could do a funnel for dog bites, you could do a funnel versus like TV or even radio. It's kind of hard to pivot your creative and your messaging. But Facebook ads, you can take a couple swings at a plate and different practice area types.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, people always talk about A and B tests, A through Z tests. Like you just laid it out. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can be able to do it. Not only that, I mean, it can actually help lower your cost per case if you're doing it right and paying attention to it as well. I remember, we had a conversation with a personal injury lawyer, and one of the things they were like, I don't want to do those things. And they saw Facebook for one side of what they thought it was supposed to be. And like we said to them, it's not about you. It's about the people on the other end. It's not you. We're not going to find people just like you, because people just like you, they are the lawyer or they have friends that are lawyers. We're not targeting you. We're targeting people that are on this platform as well. So I do love meta ads. And I love the fact that you can not just A/B test, you can A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, all through the alphabet. You can do all those different kinds of tests, and you can be very nimble with it. You're not confined to 15 seconds or 30 seconds like you would be in broadcasts.
Yeah, well said. And, and it's, like you said, the omni-channel, hey, you do just top of funnel, but your search is messed up. You don't have that capture, you're in trouble. And then on the flip side, let's say you got your search dialed in, but no one knows you don't have any awareness. Like, so it kind of goes hand in hand. You talked about the leak, right? Hey, our job produced the leads, but then, hey, their job's the leak. And what do you see there? Like, where do you advise? What are some of those fundamentals on the intake side?
I believe us agencies, we have a responsibility to ask them and talk to them and make sure even before we engage with them, like on what their processes are, because there's nothing worse than inviting good people into a bad process, right?
Mm.
And I almost feel like if we are doing our due diligence and doing these great campaigns, then one of the first things that we need to do is make sure that they can handle it. I remember Michael Mogul and I, we were talking about this before, and we talked about how if you have if you have all this advertising, you can have a great advertising campaign, right? But if you bring it in to a system that's broken, nothing will work. Not at all. And then they'll end up pointing the finger. And the one who normally gets the finger pointed at them is usually the agency. When in the beginning, we have to give them some accountability. It's a two-way street. It's not just, your problems go away the minute you write a check to us or you pay us. It's like, okay, great. We're going to partner together. Let's make sure that you can handle this. Because, part of being able to compete is not just, do you have enough money to spend? It's also, okay, do you know what to do when these come in? Do you have systems and processes? How does intake happen? Or when John at the front desk isn't here and you say John is your intake, what happens when John's out sick today? Those are the important things that you have to think about.
Yeah, I had a conversation literally last week and was digging in. We had a good marketing plan, talking about intake. I'm like, well, what's the chase? Like when somebody contacts you and sends an email, like, oh, we send a text
Hmm.
and an email. Well,
Wow.
I was like, well, what else? Like, come on, like, what else?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
call them 8 times that day? Do pre-text? Did you do different messaging to create urgency? Maybe an empathy message and an urgency message. Like, so many levels. I think the check the box too is like, oh, we got Smith AI. They're handling our intake. And I'm like, oh,
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 Chris, I think it's to the fault of a lot of the money lawyers, right? And I would say it where we got our client this. They've created the shopping mentality into the consumers. And so now the consumers are starting to check for lawyers like they shop for an item. And so they're like, hey, can you take my case? And what do you think I can get? They're wanting to know these things in the beginning. Like, what do you think we can get? But they've conditioned the audience by the multiple TV ads or internet ads by saying, we got our client this. So now there's an expectancy. Oh, that person had a car wreck on the TV ad. The lawyer said it. So maybe I can get that much too. So now it
mhm,
creates this shopping mentality for them. And then people start to think, if I see a lawyer that has more frequency on TV, maybe they're a good lawyer, you know?
mhm.
And so there's a lot that has to happen from, the law firms end as well. And they have a duty and responsibility whenever they start marketing as well.
It goes hand in hand, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things you got at VIP Marketing is you got this case cost calculator. So talk to me about how you guys developed that, what maybe that uncovered
Hmm.
through its iteration, and talk to me about that.
Well, a lot of times when you get into these engagements, right? Well, what happens is like, we'll ask them, okay, well, what's your goal? Everyone wants to say their goal. And then you'll say like, okay, where are you now? And then that's where the hesitation comes in. So with a case cost calculator, what we're doing is we're trying to show them what the pathway is or what the goal is. This is how many leads we need coming through. So now what it does for our agency, it says, okay, remember in the beginning we talked about we needed to have, you know, 200 leads a month, just throwing a number out there. And now we have kind of some guardrails to kind of show them what it could look like. Because in the beginning, they all want to know, like, they want guarantees, and we can't give them that. We can't give
Mhm,
them that. But what we can do is guide or manage the expectation upfront. And that's what our case cost calculator is doing. It's saying, okay, if this is your revenue goal, and this is what your average case value is, and this is your closing ratio, this is how many appointments we need. This is how many cases you need. And now for them, they look at it and they're like, wow, this is what I really need. So now it gives them kind of guidance. I would probably bet you a ton of lawyers out there don't know how many appointments or how many leads they need per week or what their closing ratio is to be able to get to what is considered success for them.
1,000% agree. And I also just think too, it's, when you start talking about wanted case percentages and things like that, and you hear these, hey, we want a 94, 95% want it. Well, what channel are you talking about? Are you talking about your brand stuff? Like, okay, let's hit that 95.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about cold stuff, maybe even the pay-per-click, maybe, maybe, who knows? And then that percentage goes down and you'd still be happy maybe than 80%. The non-branded versus the brand and how you can segment those. So interesting. I think part of it, you creating that awareness, then they say, oh, well, I don't have these. Well, like, hey, step one.
Yeah.
So let's just say that you got the firm comes in, they want to spend the big money with the agency, but they don't have those numbers. Are you like, hey, here's this person, they can help you with this? Like what's the talk track then?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Like, we have to have like that roadmap to whatever success looks like for them, and if it's going to be that case count, and sometimes we've had, firms realize that they need to try and get more out of their cases. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting, let's just say if you're getting your average case volume, it's $7,000 per case or whatever. It's like, and maybe you need to try and get 10,000 per case.
Right.
Then you'll ask them like, hey guys, what's your system? I mean, are you guys doing these case reviews where you can kind of bring all the attorneys together, and you might have one who's more seasoned than the other working on the case and say, man, you could probably get an extra 25,000 out of this case if you look at X, right? So sometimes a case goal calculator does a little more than just saying, this is how many appointments you need. It can help you with the undiscovereds inside of the firm that they may not be aware of, because sometimes, they may be happy with $7,000 cost per case, but in order for them to do that, they got to do tons of getting in, then they GRO some cases, there's like, hey, we might have signed, 200, but we're going to get rid of 50. And that changes their numbers. So sometimes they have to realize like, maybe we need to step it up. And, now you hear more firms talking about not being afraid to go to court, or being, we're trial attorneys and, and trying to give off that vibe, like, hey, we're going to get you more. And I think some of the firms are realizing, you know what, we need to take that up. Sometimes they need to raise their own rates is what they need to do.
It makes it a lot more palatable, on those incremental gains, instead of like, hey, I want to double my practice. Well, you got to double your leads, as opposed to maybe you just increase your wanted percentage a little bit, get a little bit more on the fees, and maybe you only need to increase your leads 25%, or 50%. And it, because it all kind of works together. We mentioned this a little bit, but how do you think about, and maybe this is antiquated, the funnel, right? You get top attention, middle consideration, and then the bottom decision. Like how do you think about that when you're creating a marketing strategy?
I can't, own this line because I think it's more than a funnel. It's more of a flywheel, because at some point, in that, what we need to start doing is asking for referrals, and growing that referral based business as well. And if you have them in just a funnel, at some point the funnel ends, it just drops, and then someone has to physically pick them up and put them back in the top of the funnel, or hopefully they remember us. But if you keep the flywheel going, they have a great experience. I mean, you have a great marketing plan, you attract them, they sign on, you treat them well, you get them a great settlement, or you go to trial for them. And then, they're happy. They go back into your flywheel. They're telling their moms, their friends, everyone in church about you. And it all starts over again. And then that flywheel just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't hear of a lot of firms, having a referral budget, or it's always, I want to ton it on TV. I want to ton it online. It's like, okay, how about community? What's your community budget? Right. I'm not talking just, going to get, school supplies and dropping them off, but what's your community budget? You're asking a lot. And one thing that we have to, tell these law firms is that you got to remember, you are asking for deposits from the community, but you're not making, you're asking for withdrawals from the community, but you're not making any deposits. And, I think, there's a few firms out there that do it really, really well. and they have a heart for it, and the community will give back to them. Like if they pulled off of, the traditional media, their referrals are so strong it could help feed them. You know, and I think that's something that people need to focus on. So the funnel needs to be the flywheel now.
So well said. And then that wheel spins faster and faster and kind of all powers itself, right? I think that's one of the things that these referral models miss out on is the systemic marketing, the clients, coming from the past. And, you see these legacy firms that, hey, they were started by the father or the parent, and it's like they got the business coming in because they've been in business for 20 years, 30 years.
Yep.
So they look at those, hey, our CAC is under $1,000. I'm like, you're not a startup. Have you thought, one other thing, I like to toss these ideas top of the dome. I see a lot of people, like you said, do really well with the community. I think we've had some guests on here that really care and they do a great job. But one thing I've always thought about is like, where does the pro bono legal work come in, right? All these attorneys need local services ad reviews. You need Google reviews. Like, I don't know, you're going to spend, some people, they spend a lot of money on the grassroots marketing. Like, could we hire a couple associate attorneys and let them do some cases, like just to get the pipeline going?
Man, that's a great point. Before I got into even doing the legal space, I worked a lot into the automotive space. And the automotive space is dang near identical to the legal space. The things you can say, can't say by state, co-op for automotive. And one of the things that was really big in automotive was just, like the BDC, how they set appointments, which is just like the legal intake, part of it. But I really think that automotive did a great job in being visible within the community. A lot of times, not every lawyer or law firm, they're visible when they want something. And I believe the most important thing is for any law firm is to integrate themselves within the firm. You could have, one lawyer who's visible for, fighting for the underserved, and it gives that firm a reputation. I'll give you an example of one that comes to mind that you bring up this topic. It was probably more than 12 years ago. I became friends with Kenny Harrell from Joy Law Firm. I don't know if you know those guys, good people. And they are a personal injury law firm through and through, and they will go to court. They're not afraid for it. And years ago, what they did was there was a high school football team, and the high school football team had an undefeated record. They were kind of robbed from going to the state championship. And what the Joy Law Firm did was they stepped in and started defending them to, the South Carolina High School League and all that other stuff. And they didn't do it for money, but what they did was they made a huge community deposit. That entire town, all those people, who do you think is the law firm that they would want to go to after a while? It was Joy Law Firm. And so, that's a great example of, just doing some good within the community and it coming back to you. I don't know if it wasn't really like there was a budget, but, for them to say, oh, we're going to allocate this much time for our attorneys. But what they did was they saw a community need and they stepped in. And people are smarter than you think. People in our community are smarter than you think. They know what's BS and what's not. And what they saw from them was no BS. And they saw them defend that same high school team, that had some kids probably go on to the NFL, but they remembered that. And that was great for their firm. So, and that's what I mean by having a community deposit. I think it's one of the things that every firm should pay attention to, especially if they're in those markets like you talked about earlier that has like 100,000 people, then great. It's not as hard for you. And if you talk about you wanting to beat like the big firms, or the big giant firms that come into your market, that's how you beat them. That's how you stand tall in that market, and they will remember that for you.
I couldn't help, and I was kind of chuckling inside my head. I was just thinking, Denver attorneys, you got a mission here with the football. You got an opportunity to be part of your community.
Oh man,
too soon, Denver fans. But anywho, Eric, this has been a ton of fun.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Love chopping it up. For our audience listening that has questions for you, that wants to learn about more of your company, like what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Man, I'm on all socials at Eric M. Elliott, man, or you can go to my website, ericelliott.com. I just love doing good things with good people, man. And Chris, man, it's just an honor, man, and a pleasure and a privilege to be able to chop it up with you, my friend.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate our podcast and share it with a friend. Every share, every comment, every rating propels us forward. For more content, insights, and updates, visit ericelliott.com. Remember, your journey, your story is what keeps us going forward. Until next time.